I'm a 28-year-old guy with a major event coming up, my wedding. My 26-year-old fiancée has always wanted to have a spring wedding. She enjoys the notion of flowers blooming and everything coming to life, which I completely understand and support because a happy fiancé equals a happy life, right? So we chose the date early in April and have been incredibly thrilled to plan everything. Now I have an older brother. To provide some context, he is 30 years old. We've had a fairly typical sibling relationship. Some nice times, some rivalries, and the usual stuff. But something happened last year that completely altered the dynamics between us. My parents unexpectedly invited me to their home. They were all secretive about why they wanted to see me and did not give me any hints over the phone. Feeling perplexed, I went over to see what was so urgent. When I arrived, it seemed like I had walked into an ambush. My brother was also present, and we all sat in the living room. That's when they dropped the bomb on me. My brother, allegedly with my parents' full support, had decided that my wedding was the ideal time and location for him to propose to his girlfriend. Yes, right in the middle of my wedding day. Imagine how that made me feel. This was intended to be a romantic day for my fiancée and me, but instead, it turned into a stage for my brother. I was immediately upset and couldn't contain my rage. They all seemed to be on his side, so I felt like I was being ganged up on. It was me against the three of them, and I felt absolutely trapped. I stood firm in the face of overwhelming numbers. I made it plain that if they carried out this plan, there would be terrible consequences. I even told them they wouldn't be welcome at the wedding if they tried to ruin our special day like that, but I did not stop there. For quite some time, I've been assisting my parents financially. After college, I got a nice job and started sending them $500 each month to help with their mortgage. They had taken up a second mortgage to pay for my brother's college education, and I wanted to help lessen their financial load. Everything was done out of goodwill, with no expectation of anything in return. I told them right then and there that I may withdraw this financial assistance if I felt it was being taken for granted. The conversation ended tensely, and I departed without having resolved anything. The next day, my brother arrived at my house, enraged. He accused me of squandering his big chance to propose because our parents were now on my side and had told him not to make any moves during my wedding. He was quite upset, but so was I. It seemed like a betrayal, using one of the happiest days of my life to advance his own agenda. This entire incident went well beyond what I could have envisioned. My brother delivered a terrible blow by accusing me of financially blackmailing our parents in order to find the perfect opportunity to propose to his girlfriend. He also stated that he was scared she might leave him if he did not propose soon. I told him it was his problem, not mine. I made it plain that if he tried anything at my wedding, I would have security remove him. Imagine how his partner would feel if she was engaged to and then thrown out of a wedding. He did not take it well. He made some harsh remarks to me before crying to our maternal grandmother, the only grandparent we have left. She's always been a peacekeeper in the family, so I wasn't surprised when she called to attempt to make things right. But my brother had altered the story to make himself appear as the victim, which didn't help matters. Even after I conveyed my side to our grandma, she appeared to sympathize with him more. I became quite heated during our conversation, and it ended with her in tears, which made me feel terrible. Feeling besieged and irritated, I contacted my parents again, hoping they'd notice how out of control things were getting. Instead, they were unhappy with me for the fight with our grandma and how firm I stood in my position. The next thing I knew, my brother was at my door again, enraged, calling me an idiot and claiming I'd destroyed his plans. My fiancée has also been dealing with a lot of drama. She is completely on my side and is about to tell my brother that if he keeps this up, he should not attend the wedding at all. It's placing a burden on everyone, and while I first felt perfectly justified in preserving our wedding day, I can't help but worry if I went too far, particularly with my brother and our grandma. It's a nasty issue, and I'm left wondering if there's a better way to handle it all without losing my family in the process. So, am I an idiot for all I've done and said to my brother and everyone else? Update #1. Thank you for helping me see things more clearly. Making my grandmother weep disturbed me deeply, and I feel bad about it. I don't generally lose my cool. I'm very calm most of the time. However, I can rapidly become furious with some family members, such as my brother, parents, and in particular my grandma. This is mostly because they appear to always defend my brother, no matter what, which feels unjust. My grandmother, in particular, has always supported my brother. She believes almost everything he says, even if it isn't true. Her strong support for him has had a significant impact on my parents, who have traditionally favored him above me. She just tried to convince me to let my brother propose to his fiancée at my wedding. When she called me about it, I completely lost it. I became really irritated and ended up shouting, which I regret because it made her cry. Now let me explain why I've been sending money to my parents. Approximately a year ago, they were on the verge of losing their home since they were still paying off a large loan they took out to pay for my brother's college. They had borrowed a lot of money, thinking it would be an investment in his future, but it left them in a difficult financial situation. 10 years ago, when they initially sought assistance, they were too proud to approach me. I didn't want them to lose their home due to pride or financial problems. I don't want the house for myself in the future. I simply want my parents to have a safe place to live. So I decided to help them. We devised a plan in which I would pay them money until I reached 30 to help manage the issue better. I even helped them connect with a financial advisor. Despite this, my brother has not been particularly helpful. He just contributes $300 per month to rent and pays nothing for additional household expenses such as electricity, water, or gas. He dropped out of college a few years ago without getting his degree, which was a major setback for my parents because they were unable to recoup their tuition costs. Now, after all these years, they're beginning to get frustrated with him. My brother eventually returned to school online and earned a degree, but just barely. This degree did help him get a better career, which is excellent. But given how much my parents had invested in his schooling, his lack of effort and attitude felt like a slap in the face to everyone. Once he received his degree, he expected everyone to constantly laud him. He's not into terrible things like gambling or spending irresponsibly, but he's always been quite self-centered and difficult to deal with. To summarize, he has not changed significantly throughout the years. He's always been greedy and demanding, expecting a lot from those around him but not giving much back. This entire incident with the wedding proposal is just another illustration of his inclination to prioritize his own desires over other people's feelings or key occasions. Dealing with all of this has been difficult, especially when it appears that the rest of the family does not share my perspective. Update #2. Wonderful news. My parents eventually backed me up. My father pointed out that he had taught my brother incorrectly, which was his fault, and that my brother should now show them proper respect. They wanted to make an official list so he could pay proper rent and utilities. He simply paid them $300 a month without contributing to utilities or food, and if he didn't want to pay, he could move out and they'd rent his room to another person. My brother went to our mother for help, but she only agreed with Dad. He appeared to be having a conniption and then departed the house. He returned a few hours later, spoke to no one, and shut himself in his room. My brother stated 2 days later that he was moving in with Grandma after she invited him, and our parents assured him that if he wanted to live with her, he could. My brother responded by saying that we all despise him for simply wanting to propose to his fiancée. My parents pointed out that it was not about him wanting to propose, but about where he wanted to do it, and he received no backing for it. Therefore, he is now refusing to speak with our parents. My grandmother tried calling me again, but I told her that my brother would not be permitted to propose during my wedding, plain and simple. So she can get over it or not come, and the same is true for her. I ended up disagreeing with her bias towards my brother when we were kids, which she initially denied. She began crying again, then stated that she would not be attending my wedding and that she could not understand why I couldn't let my brother have his way before hanging up the phone. My fiancé is completely on my side and is willing to exclude my brother and Grandma from the wedding. We've hired good security for the wedding and they'll throw my brother out in an instant. Grandmother isn't talking to my parents either, so I'm guessing my brother wept to her again, telling her mom and dad weren't enabling him anymore, and she offered for him to move in with her, but she can do nothing to persuade me. My last discussion with her made her realize that I did not want to notify my brother's girlfriend, but she contacted me on a Saturday. She viewed my tale online and recognized it could be me because of how I described my brother and grandmother. So, she now knows. She ended up tearing my brother a new one, but he still tried to excuse himself from her. She informed him that they were finished and had no further contact with him. My brother, of course, blamed me, despite the fact that his girlfriend claimed she'd been ready to leave him for a while and that if he tried to propose anywhere, she'd say no. My brother returned to my house in a condition of desperation, announcing that he would boycott my wedding. He truly believed he had leverage, that he and Grandma would not go. I stated I wouldn't miss him, but he's in his 30s and needs to mature. My parents have severed the umbilical cord and are no longer supporting him. They are already renovating his room to rent it to someone else. They intend to rent out my former bedroom since they need the money after he dug a financial hole for them by dropping out of college to leech off them. They spent everything they had on him, and he was not thankful. That caused my brother to shut down and depart, and we haven't heard from him since then. Update #3. My grandmother called me again to condemn me for refusing to let my brother propose. He seemed to be completely devastated by his ex. Yeah, he's so distraught that he's already on Tinder seeking a date, which I mentioned to Grandma. She claimed it was only his way of coping. I stated I didn't care. Then my mother offered me her standard line, "I don't understand why." That's what she always says when I refuse to do something for my brother after he cheated on me. For example, when attending an online institution, I gave a loan to my brother. He didn't want to repay it, despite his promise. Even after landing a nice job, he still had the money. He just didn't want to reimburse me. So I told Grandma that I was never going to trust him again, and she responded, "I don't understand why." I yelled at her that she did understand. She just acts like she doesn't because she doesn't want to. She's always supported my brother, no matter what he did. And as a result, she's no longer invited to my wedding. And I don't care if she cries. She made her bed with the side she liked, so she can now live with it. Of course, she burst into tears, crying like a sad whale and calling me a horrible grandson. I stated she was a nasty grandmother, and I'm tired of her pretending everything was fine when she used to beat my buttocks and then tell me I'd be a bad boy if I told my parents she'd punish me. I instructed her not to call me again unless she admitted the truth and offered me a genuine apology. I also informed my parents about what had transpired, and they said they didn't care if I yelled at her anymore since she would never stop siding with my brother no matter what. My parents have done considerably better since my brother moved out. They have 2 rooms ready for rent and are looking for a tenant. My father is also working on emptying out the attic to create a place for someone to rent. They are converting as many rooms in their home as possible into habitable areas. They'll need the rent money to pay off their bills, and they're still grateful for the money I've been sending them on a regular basis. My parents sat me down a while ago and apologized profusely for everything that happened from my upbringing until now. They claimed they had no good explanations for why my brother was the favorite when they shouldn't have played favorites at all. The fact that I was still eager to aid them despite everything they had done helped them realize how terrible their parents were. I haven't heard anything from my brother's ex. She wants nothing more to do with my family, and I can't blame her. I recently checked her social media, and she appears to be doing well without my brother. I'll just say, excellent for you. Live well and don't let insane people like my brother get in again. My fiancé is overjoyed that I stood my ground, because she wanted my brother and grandmother out much sooner. But then she told me something I never knew. Apparently, on the few occasions she was alone with my grandmother, she told her all sorts of things about me, which my fiancé never believed. She couldn't remember much, but Grandma told me about various things my brother had done that were blamed on me. But the point is that my grandmother was attempting to persuade my fiancé that I was a terrible egg as a youngster, and that if she didn't marry me, she should keep a tight eye on me. So indeed, Grandma was trying to poison the well with additional lies. The fact that the old hag was still discussing things with people like my fiancé when I wasn't around enraged me. So I'm quite grateful that I've removed the tumors that are my brother and grandma from my life. I don't need them anymore. Update #4. I knew it. I just knew, and some of you predicted it. My grandmother could not leave me well enough alone. She took my brother to my parents' place. My parents no longer care because the problem opened their eyes a while ago. I wasn't there to witness it, but my grandmother told my parents how she had been totally humiliated by me and couldn't understand why I would do this over something as minor as my brother proposing at my future wedding. I didn't expect this following portion. My mother, who had been a passive doormat to her mother for as long as I can remember, suddenly had it with Grandma about how she's a narcissist, and her influence had made her and my father appear to be one as well, and they were idiots to allow it. My parents advised them both to go, especially my brother, who had used them as a veritable ATM for years, while contributing very little financially. Grandma, I'm told, went into tears, and my brother was mostly silent. The following day, Grandma contacted me again to shout at me. I let her yell while my fiancé and I simply let the phone sit on the coffee table in speaker mode. After a while, Grandma discovered I wasn't responding and yelled at me to speak up, so I described her as a coward who believes she is in command, but she is not and will never be. She can't control me since she doesn't have any leverage. Then I confronted her with the lies she told about me to my fiancé, which Grandma promptly denied. But then my fiancé stood up, saying she told me everything Grandma had said to her, and I wondered why she would do so. Did she not want me to be happily married? That's when it came out. Grandma yelled that she was furious that I was marrying before my brother. She'd wanted to see him marry first because he was older and her favorite grandson, and she felt the least I could have done was let my brother try to restore their relationship by proposing at my wedding. While my grandmother would rather make up whatever reason she could to make my brother the perfect boy, she lied about me in order to harm our relationship in the hopes that my brother would marry first, and she freely admitted to having a favorite grandson. She is a selfish narcissist. All I could hear on the line was Grandma sobbing loudly and my brother trying to calm her. He said nothing to me, and the phone hung up. And sure, this time I did block both her and my brother's numbers. I really hope this is the end of it. I don't need this type of drama before I get married. Final update: it's been a ride. A lot has transpired since my last post, so I chose to wait until I was married and settled in after my honeymoon before speaking to everyone. First and foremost, I want to state that I know nothing about taxes other than the fact that I pay them. However, someone here questioned how I could write off the money I provided my parents monthly for their mortgage, which piqued my interest in the idea that I might be breaking the law. I looked into it, and long story short, the individual who used to do my taxes is no longer doing them. So I brought my questions to the owner of the tax agency and said that the person who was doing my taxes was obtaining me a roughly 1/3 write-off on the money I was sending to my parents on a monthly basis. So the owner stated he'd double-check my records and contact me back later. It took a few days, but he told me that the man who did my taxes did a few things wrong. The firm fired him based on his previous record of doing so, and the owner apologized deeply and requested that I not take my business elsewhere. So I informed him that as long as my records were clean, I'd stay with them, and he promised to make sure they were. I'm going to give him the chance to make things right. Since my last post, my parents have successfully rented out both of their spare rooms to young women who are first-time renters, and they have each taken a room. Both are friendly enough, but I have scarcely spoken with them. My parents claim they're nice tenants, so we'll see how it goes. Now we'll move on to the period leading up to my wedding. Well, my grandmother went insane after I told her off on the phone about a month ago. She went off her rocker and lashed out at my brother, which I expected her to never do given how much she loves and enables him. After approximately a week, the neighbor heard all of the ruckus and checked on her, and she assaulted him for it. Police were called, and Grandma was arrested after attempting to fight one of the cops. But she's a feeble little old lady with false teeth, and there's not much she can do for them. My parents went in to see her, but visitors were not allowed until the 3 days had passed. When my parents met with her, she was hamming it up, playing the victim, and attempting to regain my parents' support. My mother stated that Grandma was still blaming me, and that she still had the right to attend my wedding. My mother said she lost it after everything she said and did, all the falsehoods and gaslighting, and being angry at me for something as trivial as marrying before my childless older brother. Meanwhile, my brother was relaxing in her house because he had the place to himself until Grandma was allowed to return home. I don't have much knowledge after that because my parents haven't bothered to see Grandma or my brother since. Next up is my wedding. The outdoor site my wife and I chose was stunning. There was a large man-made pond with paddle boats and lots of wild ducks and frogs. The setting was also near a golf course, so kids had a great time looking for misplaced golf balls like they were Easter eggs. They actually discovered a bunch of them, so that was some wonderful, clean entertainment. I did have security, and my grandmother did turn up and try to get in, despite the fact that her invitation had been officially canceled. She still had the documentation, which had arrived in the mail after she refused to return it after being uninvited. My brother wasn't with her, yet she went 200 miles alone to try to sneak into my wedding. When the guard refused to let her in, she became a crazed witch. She screamed my name and asked to be let in, refusing to go until she spoke with me. Then security threatened the police, and she ended up shouting at them before crawling back to her car, and that was the end of it. But this wasn't the end of the story. Oh no, because now that my elder brother was the only one still talking to Grandma, I'm guessing she started taking things out on him. There were no more family scapegoats for her to rant at, so she began to obsess with my brother because he lived with her. I know this because he wrote me a letter, despite the fact that I had blocked him on everything except snail mail. I received the letter after returning from my honeymoon. It was a letter that contained both apologies and blame for me. He apologized for trying to propose at my wedding and said that it would have been a bad idea, and I was correct in describing him as underhanded in asking his ex to marry him in front of so many people. But then he claimed he was upset that he didn't get to attend my wedding because I couldn't disregard his trauma. Then he apologized for allowing Grandma to treat me the way she did for so long, because he is now experiencing some of that himself. Then he blamed me for making Grandma so upset in the first place by yelling at her and then refusing to allow her to attend my wedding. He blamed me me for our parents removing him from their home and forcing him to live with Grandma, who was driving him crazy. They did not throw him out. He went when they asked him to pay his rent on time. Now he is looking for an apartment. He asked my parents to move back in with them, but they flatly refused and instructed him to get his own apartment. That concludes that. My honeymoon was wonderful. We got on the road and made it to the coast. My wife also insisted that we go riding. I'm not much of a cyclist, but it was fun to ride a couple of kilometers down a seaside road. We ended up exhausted and need to get in better shape. I'd like to thank everyone for listening and sharing suggestions. It helped.